Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. This is Hubert O'Hearn, and you are listening to Thoughts, Comments, Opinions. This is actually the second of a four-part series on Irish writers that I recorded, and the first one that's got uploaded because we're still on the shakedown cruise. You know what I mean? But we have the intro music now, as composed by Ciara Donnelly, also known as Yellow Bridge, my tag team partner in playwriting. Today's interview that you're going to be listening to is with Alan McMonagle. Alan's a writer based down the road from me in Galway, Ireland, and we're going to be discussing in particular a short story that he wrote for the Young Islanders anthology as published by New Island Press. We'll also get into short story writing in general, the appreciation of short stories around the world, and a fair bit of crack, as they say in Ireland. So, with that said, you can, in a tribute to my old pal Tom Snyder, sit back, relax, fire up a podtini, and listen to the words as they fly through the air. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending what time you're listening to this. We're continuing with our series on Irish writers, and today we have on a short story writer and also a dramatist named Alan McMonagle, who's down the road from me in Galway. Hi, Alan. How are you today?
Hello, Hubert. Thanks for having me, and brilliant pronunciation on the surname.
Well, I've lived here for a little over 2 years. The funny thing is that the accent I picked up completely vanishes whenever I talk to anybody Irish. I think it's an inner humility or embarrassment or something.
Oh, I don't know. You got it. You got it pretty well there.
Good. So, how you came to my attention was a short story you submitted for fantastic, or actually were invited to submit to a fantastic anthology I read recently called Young Islanders. The story is called The Remarks. Would you like to tell the listening audience a little bit about what it's about?
Sure, yeah. Essentially, The Remarks, it's contemporary story because that was part of Dave Lordan, the editor's brief. That was his one remit, actually, that it had to be a contemporary story. And I think it's a story of three young men. They've come to be friends by accident, and they're sharing an apartment for whatever reason. And they have to live with each other and live with their contemporary situation. And essentially the three of them, I think, have taken a look out their window and, for now anyway, have decided that life is only worth half a try. So each of them individually retreat into their own, if you like, ways of dealing with their surroundings and circumstances.
There's a wonderful sense of humor to it, in terms of the magical properties of bread and so forth. And why I want to ask you about that is that I think it's one of the great aspects of short stories, that you can put in truly fantastical ideas that maybe wouldn't sustain over a 200 or 300 page novel, you know?
That's right. I think you've alighted on one of the real joys and one of the, if you like, sneaky advantages a short story does have over, say, the longer, slower, cumulative stretch of a novel. You can experiment, I think, with a short story. You can have stretches of experimentation within a novel, but also, as you point out, you can really stretch reality as far as a plot goes. And that's one of the things that I like to attempt now and again when I'm writing short stories. In this story, one of the three guys, and it's the narrator in actual fact, the way that he retreats from, say, the everyday is to he just jumps into this fantasy where he recasts himself and his two flatmates as a successful rock and roll band, and they basically he goes all the way with it. They are quickly, commercially and critically successful. They achieve dizzy heights, and then they essentially press self-destruct, and it all comes crashing down yet again. And I had a lot of fun with that in the story.
You mentioned that you had an excerpt that you'd like to read, so if you'd like to do that, be my guest.
What I might do is, what I read from the start, Hubert, it sort of sets the tone.
Sure.
And it introduces the three guys quite quickly. And one of the things that sort of brings them together, though they are not obviously friends. The remarks. We had been living in the flat for almost a year. Three of us, Madigan, Eric and me, friends by mistake and poor to boot. Madigan was from the country and always in trouble. Eric was from a small town outside Philadelphia and liked to be by himself. I preferred to keep where I was from a secret and pass the time trying to quell my urge to steal. Together one morning, the three of us discovered we liked poaching-flavoured bread. It was Madigan's idea to soak the bread. Fed up with Eric's miserly attitude, he had dumped one of Eric's loaves into a pan of poaching. And when Eric emerged from his room and took a bite of the poaching-soaked bread, he clasped his hands together and said, "Hey, this isn't bad." Then he began to weep. Madigan and I didn't know what was happening to him. He took a bite of bread and tears sprang from his eyes. "I've lost it," he cried over and over again. "Don't touch my cap," he snibbled, when I tried to console him by presenting to him the baseball cap he had just whipped off his distressed head. Then, having nothing better to do, I tried a slice of bread and at once began to weep as well. I didn't know why I wept, but the tears welled up inside me and gushed down my face. Madigan stared at the pair of us. Then he took some bread, dipped it in the poaching, and as soon as he tasted it, he too began to weep.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Oh, as I say, I loved it and all the stories in the anthology. Now, when I was talking to your editor, Dave Lorden, yesterday, and he told me that that the 12 writers he'd invited and given the task or assignment of writing about Ireland today. How did you decide on this for the specific story?
Let me see. Well, for starters, as you said, Dave was commissioned, and he in turn invited 12 of us to submit stories. And so I got an email from Dave. It's about 15 months ago now. It must be, and basically, he gave me a very brief remit, just keep it, contemporary. But in addition to that, I'd met Dave briefly at a couple of literary festivals about the country, and I knew that he was very, very, very widely read and very knowledgeable, both current and past. The Irish writing scene and thematic concerns, and I knew that he has a very eclectic taste. He's got a wonderful interest in embracing something new and something fresh, and so
indeed, yes.
And so I was kind of, and I think one of the reasons that the writers that he did source are certainly writers known to him that would possibly embrace this if you like, thematic and stylistic diversification that he seemed to think was at large in Irish writing currently, but not necessarily getting the exposure it deserves. And so I quickly knew that I was certainly going to try something, be it an experimental effort or one of these fanciful plots that you allude to yourself, Hubert. And yeah, I mean, I always had this story with three guys in a flat. Slack them, they're a little bit disaffected and a little bit disappointed, and they haven't really discovered who they are yet, I suppose. And then there was that stretching reality where that fanciful plot came in, this idea of casting them out together as a successful rock band and seeing where that would go. And it came together, I think, nicely enough, mixing the humour and eventually having it snap around, I think, where maybe there is something, or certainly the suggestion that something is not all well with, at least not all well with the narrator.
In general, and I'll explain why I asked this. How do you find the reception for short stories in Ireland? And why I ask is that I'm from Canada. And throughout North America, when writers write short stories, they tend to get the received observation from even friends saying that, oh, you weren't able to finish the novel. That they don't get proper respect as an art form. So I'm wondering how it is here.
Well, I know what you're saying. I mean, I have a humorous anecdote myself to fire straight back at you. I mean,
sure.
Because I've published 2 collections of short stories with small press in Ireland, which is really the go-to place if you have a bag of stories and you're looking for ways to get them published. But after my first collection came out, I mean, I thought, here I am, I've landed now, I'm on my way, and I was out in a bar for some, hard-earned celebratory drinks with some close friends, and I don't think I'd finished my second beer when one of them came up to me and said, and Alan, you should write a book next. So yeah, I know.
The training wheels can come off now.
So there you go. I mean, you can you can have them whipped out from beneath you very, very quickly. But that said, I mean, I find the short story as a form personally very satisfying, and anytime I get to read one or offer one in public, via a literary gathering of sorts, or we offer them out individually to journals, and usually there are places to publish the stories in Ireland, and there is respect for them, and there is a reception for them, and there is I think a special place for them. I think the bigger publishers run a little scared of them because they sort of view them as a hard sell. So for me, I think it's the publishers that have decided this. But I mean, I'm going to write a novel as well, but I will always write short stories too.
Now, you've also written for radio, which interests me, as I'm working on an adaptation of a play with my musical co-writer as well. How did you find that process, coming from the world of prose fiction into writing radio drama?
For starters, I love the radio. I'm I'm a sound person as opposed to a visual person. In various ways people learn. I seem to hear things before I see them. There's a lot of dialogue in my own prose, especially in the stories. And so I think I always felt that I would give this a go at some point. I wrote. I looked at the spec on the RTE radio drama website. So it's 40 minutes, which translates as roughly 1 page of script per minute of airtime. So to me that was manageable, and I had a couple of ideas, and I don't think, again, within that short story, Remit, taking into account what you say about fanciful plots and or experimentation, I had a couple of ideas that might translate well to the radio drama medium. And in the case of this radio play idea that I had called Oscar Night, and it worked out quite well. It's essentially a tale of two aging sisters. They're a little odd, a little quirky. They have this annual ritual, and it's interrupted one night by an escaped felon, and basically it plays out from there in rather unexpected ways. And again, I mean, it was just a joy just being able to tell the story via dialogue all the way.
Yeah, it is, and there's a wonderful line about radio that I heard years ago. The name Larry King may not mean a ton to you, but to a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they'll know who I'm talking about. Larry King did a chat show on radio and television,
Sure.
A simulcast for decades. Well into his 80s. And a guest asked him once, which do you like better, TV or radio? And he gave the most wonderful answer. He said, radio, it's more visual.
Yeah, I mean, that says it all, really. I mean, if you can paint in words, or in the case of radio, it's, you're confined to dialogue. I mean, you don't even get, with a live theatre, stage performance, the set directions, the set can do a lot for you. Silence is the enemy of radio. If you hit a bum note, I mean, all the listener has to do is turn the radio off. So you're really having to show up, and every line, every spoken line has to count. And if you can paint a picture there, I mean, I think you've pulled off something special, and I think that's that particular quote, as well as being very witty and astute. I mean, I think it's a very fine compliment to radio, and really throws down the gauntlet, lays the challenge.
So, at what point in life did you realize that you were compelled to enter our thankless job as writers?
Well, let me say, I mean, I was writing stories at a very young age, I mean, I remember having a Greek's myth and legend, a big compendium, of all these stories, the 300 Spartans, Jason and the Argonauts, the Leonidas and Achilles, the wooden horse of Troy. And God, I must have read those stories cover to cover, I don't know how many times, but straight away I would bolt upstairs, and scribble out my own versions. I mean, there were 2 and 3 page efforts, not because I was getting bored, but because I had so many, at least I thought I had so many ideas at the time. So, I'd no sooner started one, I was bringing it to a swift conclusion and on to the next one. And on into national school, 3rd class. My teacher was the author, Patrick McCabe, author of the Butcher Boy. I mean, gosh, he would talk about opening your eyes to the power of language and the, words. I mean, we didn't do a lot of geography or sums in this particular class, but we must have been the only primary school class in the history of Irish national school education, anyway, that did not want to go home at 3:30 when the bell rang, because he just had it spellbound. I mean, I remember he gave us early offerings from what would become his first book. It was called The Adventures of Shay Mouse. And what I always liked was the byline, the mouse from Longford, because I grew up in Longford, and obviously this is where I was going to school. And we were getting all these, if you like, previews of. I mean, he had us on the edge of our seats. I mean, he was just a brilliant storyteller, and there were a few things that were going on early in my life that I like to think planted the seed. I stopped for a long time for various reasons, and didn't return until I was, well into adulthood. But it was always there, I think.
What was, or if there are several, pick one. Best piece of writing advice you've either been told or ran across in reading.
Well, it's 3 words. It's persevere, persevere, persevere. Hubert, I mean, you must. Writing is a minority sport, and we're chasing a small reward. So you just really have to learn how not to give up. I mean, it's that's every day is the first day. That's the way I look on it. And you must be at times brutal with yourself. You hear great things about, the muse isn't here, but I mean, the muse is seldom here. I mean, you have to pick up a stick and go after her yourself. But I think if you show up every day, at least you're giving yourself a fighting chance, and somehow eke out the time, because it is. I mean, it's a slow game, and I remember my good writing friend telling me, writers develop at a glacial pace as well, and so. I mean, that's really what it is. It's perseverance. It's figuring out how not to give up.
Agreed, because I've never believed in the concept of writer's block. I also edit writers, and look, I'm the same way, I don't really have an idea today, or there's a cloud, outside, you find whatever reason. So I finally started telling people what I tell myself: write a sentence. You can come up with a decent sentence, like 12 words. Get that going, and hopefully that primes the pump, but at least get a sentence out,
That's right. I mean, I had a professor, and he used to say the same thing. It's all, prose is all about the sentence. If you like, poetry is all about the line, but prose is all about the sentence. And what he used to ram home for us was that it doesn't have to be the most brilliant sentence. It doesn't have to contain the most enlightening, proposition. It doesn't have to be the best language, but just write one satisfying sentence. Because chances are, if you find it satisfying, somebody else will as well. And then you're off. And it's just putting another sentence after that first sentence, and another, and another. And then we have a paragraph, and then we have a page, and so it goes. You shouldn't become a slave to it. And writing is rewriting too. I mean, if it doesn't come in the first touch, which it seldom does, let's face it. I mean, sometimes we have to wait for the language too. But get it down first, I think, is important.
Sorry. I was going to say that another great line was from Andy Warhol, of all people. He was asked, how do you know when a painting is done? And he said, when the check clears.
Yeah.
How do you know when a story's done?
Well, a line I like was from, again of all people, Philip Larkin.
Oh yeah.
The British poet, and he said a good story is a beginning, a muddle, and an end. And it's the muddling part that I both enjoy and fear, because you can get going, and endings require soft hands, they're delicate, but it's that bit that gets you from that initial sentence to the point where you must stop where the writing stops. That's where I think the real, blood and sweat and tears and all of that. That's where you're really, battling with chisel and mortar. But yeah, it was and I have that written down somewhere because that I might have verbalized it now. I'm muddling now.
Good one.
Yeah.
Do you lay out your stories with plot outlines and so on and so forth? In other words, when you sit down to write the first word, do you know where the story's going, or do they tend to? Do your characters tend to surprise you and haul the thing off in directions you didn't expect at first?
Yes, I like the element of surprise. I like not knowing what's going to happen. To me, writing it's mysterious. It's revelatory. It's contradictory, and to a certain extent, instinctive. And to a certain extent, I feel as if I knew exactly what was going to happen at every step of the way. I think I'd be reluctant to keep going for the simple reason that I do know. I think it's. I think a lot of what writing is certainly in my case, it's taking what I know, which isn't a hell of a lot, and quickly moving into a landscape of not knowing, which is vast. Because I think then there's a chance that something might happen with language and character, surprise, mystery. Something might declare itself, and then I think you've got something to work with. I think that can be one of the great joys of writing.
One of my favorite moments, and I suspect that you probably have the same, because you have a lot of wit in your stories, is that I find when I'm writing something and when I laugh out loud because what I've just written has surprised me, I think that, okay, this is good.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a good sign. I tend to read aloud all the time as well as I write, and reading as I go along. Anyway, all the time. And if occasionally when you surprise yourself in a good way or in an instinctive way, gosh, where did that come from, or how did I do that? I mean, I actually stop for a few minutes. I've done well now. I'm gonna, it might be 2 or 3 lines, an exchange of dialogue, or 2 or 3 sentences that just crystallize so well, and I read them back 3, 4, 5 times to myself quietly out loud. I pace the kitchen, patting myself on the back. I've done well there. I don't mind letting another half hour pass, where nothing happens. If I land on these moments where I you've done pulled off something that's effective and that others will pick up on as well.
Absolutely. We may
it's like what I was saying.
Enjoy it, So
yeah, I mean, it's like chasing that. Sorry, go on here.
No.
It's just like that. We're chasing a small reward, but when it's there, we recognize it. I want to, acknowledge it and embrace it and, clutch it and hug it as much as possible for as long as possible, and before moving on to the inevitable next part of the muddle, I suppose.
Absolutely. So, what are you working on now? Is there a new collection coming out, or?
I'm working on new stories all the time. Yes, there would be several maybe on the go at any one time in various stages of completion. So there can be fallow spells where nothing is actually reaching a finish line, and then lo and behold, 2 or 3 may get finished within a quick spell of time. I'm also working on a novel as well because again, it's that wanting to see what will happen. If you enter that longer stretch, that slower accumulation of just one sustained piece. And that's proving, it's just a totally different animal. It's so different. I mean, I catch myself in short story modes so often writing the novel, that I just need to put the brakes on a little and just let it, just let it play out and a little more measured, I suppose, is the way what I'm trying to say.
I hear you. Yeah, I started working on a novel a little over a month ago, and it sort of sits there like this large bear in the corner of the room that every now and then demands. It says, "Feed me now." Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll write another chapter, oh large bear, before you eat me.
I mean, that's what I mean. A short story, it can be such an intense, shortened, heightened spell of activity, whereas the novel, you just got to. I mean, I think you've got to go to ground actually, and literally just take as long as it takes out of your life until the thing gets done. With that, depending on how firm your idea is, how fast you can work, what the energy is like, what the time is like, obviously what a person's situation is, but whatever it takes, I think that it's really head down and stay in the quarry. You're just chiseling away, and let's face it, a novel isn't going to declare itself until at least in my case, until well into it. And then you get a feel for what it's about and who's driving it, and you're just looking for ways to keep going all the time, I think.
Truly. Now, where can the listeners find more of your work? So this is when you get to plug titles and websites.
Okay, well, I've got 2 collections of short stories out there somewhere. The first one is called Liar Liar. That was published by Words on the Street in 2009. My second one is called Psychotic Episodes. That was published 2 years ago, 2013, by Arlen House. Details where to buy the books can be found on my website. That's www.alanmcmonagle.com. And yeah, that's it to date. Listen into the radio play as well if you get a chance. It's a bit of fun, lots of humour, lots of quirky stuff with some funny music thrown in to add some atmosphere.
Great, yeah, and that would be on the RTE player. And for those who don't know, RTE is the national network of this lovely country that we both live in. Alan McMonagle, I thank you ever so much for being our guest today, and happy writing to you, my friend.
Thanks very much for having me, Hubert.
Cheers. And that concludes our interview with Alan McMonagle. I want to thank him for his participation and all that, and I want to thank you too. The special effects weren't particularly special, as I'm sure you noticed, but we'll be getting better at this. And I just want to give you a look ahead. We have 2 more authors and editors coming up in our Irish Writers series, Dave Lorden and Roisin O'Donnell. Also coming up, we have artists, we have dog trainers, we have more writers, and basically I want your feedback, and I know that everybody at Hispanic News Online does as well. There will be contact information somewhere in the written bits around this video podcast or audio podcast or this thing you're listening to. Anyway, we do appreciate your feedback, and if you know anybody that I should be talking to, they don't have to be Irish, they don't have to be Hispanic, they could be anywhere in the world. I'd love to hear from you. So, one more quote for old Tommy. From all of us who work the late shift, good night everybody, and be seeing you.